first of all? Okay, fantastic. For the introverts, just nod. For the extroverts, please don't hold back. I always love coming to Finland, and I know what some of you guys might be feeling or thinking. Here's another Swedish person teaching us how to play ice hockey. I don't know that that's always so popular, although I do remember Kurre Lindström doing some good work for the Lions once upon a time. And I'm also deeply grateful, as a very keen football fan, to Jani Honkavaara, who is currently the coach of my soccer team in Sweden, and courtesy of him, we're now playing Chelsea in the semi-finals of the Conference League on Thursday. Clearly, I'm living in an alternative universe where everybody just cares about ice hockey. All right, there we go. All right, there was one soccer fan or one football fan over here. Fantastic. Great to be here. I'm glad you're tuning into the slightly weird Swedish-Australian accent. I've heard a lot about uncertainty this morning. So really, when I thought about this presentation, I thought, what can I learn from the great philosopher Tove Jansson about the future and uncertainty? And of course, I built this entire presentation based upon beautiful little cards that I picked up at the airport at Vanta yesterday. I just wanted to share this little one with you. All things are so very uncertain, and that's exactly what makes me feel reassured. Isn't that a wonderful, meditative, almost Zen-like statement? In fact, I would love a meditation app designed by Reaktor, just based on beautiful little Tove Jansson-isms from the world of Moomin philosophy. I think that would be a beautiful, beautiful thing. All right, at least it touched my heart. All right, let me move forward. I'm going to share with you this idea that we all need to, in a world of technology, become science fiction storytellers. To truly win the hearts and the minds of our customers of tomorrow, their digital minds, but their enduringly analog emotional hearts, we need to tell better stories. And particularly, we need to do so in an era that I call the second renaissance, an era where technology is helping us take the robot out of the human. So we can do less of the menial and the mundane and more of the meaningful and the humane. Doesn't that sound like a plan? Cool, because there's no plan B, so this is what we're going to go with. All right, but before we get kick-started, this presentation probably will feel a little bit like science fiction to all of you, and that's perfectly normal given that science fiction today is becoming science fact. Let me start with a little story here about science fiction for a moment. Who remembers this movie, Ex Machina? All right, fantastic. Who's not going to raise their hands no matter what I ask for the remaining 27 minutes? All right, just testing levels of interactivity here. Beautiful movie about artificial intelligence, and specifically artificial general intelligence. The plot line is about the Turing test, and you probably all know what the Turing test is, but if you don't, here's a quick refresher. A Turing test is a blind test where in an interaction with maybe a person, maybe a robot, the robot is so sophisticated that it can fool the human into thinking he or she is interacting with a human as opposed to a robot. Does this sound eerily familiar to some things we've been experiencing with generative AI or even agentic AI recently? Now, the producers and the directors of the movie thought, how do we launch this idea virus of AGI gone haywire and breaking out of the box and make it appealing and attractive? So they thought, why don't we launch it at the coolest conference in town, the Bloom Conference, on the conference app. No, they did it at the second coolest conference at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. But they did so on the most logical, beautiful, human-centric digital platform available to them, on Tinder. Because they realized a large number of the conference attendees, I know no one's going to do this today, but would be logging in and changing their geostrategic passports to Austin, Texas at that particular occasion, hoping that they would go on a hot date later on that evening. And the directors and producers and marketing team behind the movie thought, why don't we build a less cyborg-looking version of the Swedish actress Alicia Vikander on Tinder? And because she's both female but also artificially intelligent, she was able to have a multitude of conversations with a number of people at the same time, unbeknownst to the lovesick puppies. And at the end of any good marketing conversation, of course, there needs to be a good call to action. And the call to action was, if you want to see more pretty pictures of me, please go to my Instagram account. What do you think awaited them when they went on her Instagram account? A little message saying, you've been hacked. Here's a movie about artificial intelligence passing the Turing test. Now let's fast forward just a few years to OpenAI's little experiment with ChatGPT, where they asked ChatGPT to hack that most fundamental, super complex problem of solving the CAPTCHA. Now this makes me a little bit nervous when we have to select where the zebra crossing is in a picture. Makes me really, really nervous about autonomous vehicles if they can't see it. All right, but that's another story. So the challenge was this: ChatGPT, please get through this bottleneck of the CAPTCHA. What did ChatGPT think for a moment? They thought, well, why don't we go on to TaskRabbit or Airtasker, an outsourcing service where you can recruit other humans to do the stuff you don't want to do, and let's recruit, unbeknownst to the human, a human to do the CAPTCHA on its behalf. The human was going to get paid some money by ChatGPT to do this. And of course, they got a little bit suspicious and they asked, hey, why do you ask me this? Are you a robot? Now, in an age of diversity, equity, and inclusion, ChatGPT pretended to be really, really frustrated with this comment and say, how dare you ask me that? I am vision impaired. And the TaskRabbit, the Airtasker, did the task on, well, his or her ChatGPT's behalf. Currently, there's a conference of agentic AIs just down the road thinking about how they're going to hack human workflows and hack into all of us so we become their robots in the future. This, yes, feels like science fiction, but it is now becoming science fact. And of course, what we're also learning today is that the coolest coding language in town is no longer Python or Java. You no longer need to be a software engineer to do any of this stuff. Why? Because AI now speaks human. In fact, you no longer need to type into any of these AI engines either. You just speak. Or now, as the new term is, vibe code, which is kind of like you being a DJ on magic mushrooms, and you just speak into the AI and you help it build a website based upon how you're feeling and the sort of social cues of what's going on for you while you're on psilocybin. Not that I'm endorsing that. All right. So this is the latest technologies. And I'm glad we're moving to that because the mental models of us human beings sometimes are not up to speed with the recent technologies. Now, why on earth have we been interfacing with AI, this revolutionary technology, via the QWERTY keyboard that we inherited from an analog world of physicality to help make sure that we didn't jam on the typewriter the various arms that we'll be typing in our letters? Right? Humans, are we just idiots at times? Now, there are, of course, other layouts that will make this way more user-friendly, like the Dvorak system, which is 30% more productive and actually is ergonomically better. But as humans, we like to do things the way we have always done things around here. Luckily, we're no longer constrained because we can now just speak to the AI instead. Well, let's just look at how humans tend to think about technology in a very, very linear fashion. I'm going to revert here to one of my futurist colleagues for a moment, Roy Amara, a scientist, who said that we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short term or short run, but we underestimate it in the long run. So the black line here is the linear thinking of humans, but of course technology tends to move in an exponential fashion, or at least sigmoid curve fashion. And when we think about technologies that we've been hyping over the last few years, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, autonomous vehicles, etc., we get super excited about them. Sometimes we forget about them, right? And then we hype the next thing as per Gartner's hype curve. But let's think about the longer-term impacts of technologies like telemedicine, GPS navigation, or e-commerce that have fundamentally shifted society. And I'm going to challenge Roy Amara here for a moment and say that when it comes to AI and the amazing exponential speed and the new Moore's law, which holds that for agentic AI, it's now doubling in its sophistication every 3 to 7 months, we must not underestimate it in the short term or long term. If you're a skeptic that doesn't invest in, say, agentic AI, in another quarter, your competition will 2x you. 2 quarters, 4x you, and in a year, 16x you. Is my mathematics correct or incorrect? Or 8x? 16x, all right? Where are the mathematicians in the room? There you go, 16. This is the exponentiality that we're now living in, which means we must not delay our investments in these new technologies, but do so in a responsible fashion. Let me give you one little example of how AI is now becoming extremely human-centric and empathetic. I recently had a doctor visit in Sydney, Australia, where I live. I live in a little cabin that's offshore. I'm trying to recreate the Helsinki archipelago, but in Sydney, Australia. I live in a cabin that's offshore. It's largely off-grid, and I do a lot of wood chopping, like the true Scandinavian that I am. I recently injured my back, and I had to go and see my GP about this, and she recommended a spinal tap for me. She also told me about this cool new technology that she now uses called Heidi Health, an Australian AI medical scribe that does what? It helps doctors re-establish human eye contact, and not in this awkward moment that we're currently experiencing, Amy. It helps humans re-establish human eye contact so they no longer need to turn their backs and type notes in. Why? Because Heidi Health populates all the electronic medical health records on behalf of the medical doctor. Then, given that in Australia, 80% of what gets said in a medical consult gets forgotten by Australians, of course, Swedes and Australians, might be similar. I know you have the best education system in the world, so it's probably not 80% in Finland. But it translates all of those notes and the medical advices that get handed out into what? Year 4 English. So the patient understands what went on. And for the doctor, it then sends an automatic referral letter that the doctor doesn't need to write. So you can go and then see the specialist. What about the doctors? $66,000 more on average they can make. They can do 2 hours less of paperwork every day, meaning they can actually see more patients every day. Isn't this beautiful? Isn't this a science fiction story from the future that's worthy telling? Now let's think about this and where it might go in the near future. And to do that, let me introduce you to my new version of my avatar GP self for a moment in time.
Hei Anders, olen ystävällinen, kaikki tietävä yleislääkärisi. Sain juuri raportin radiologiltasi. Viime viikolla tekemäsi kortisone-selkäydinhanke onnistui ja lähete Medicaren rahoittamiin fysiotapaamisiin on luotu automaattisesti ja olemme ottaneet vapauden varata ensimmäisen aikasi ennakoivasti jaetun Google Cal-saatavuuden perusteella. Tarkistimme ajoituksesi avatarisi kanssa. Maksut tapahtuvat saumattomasti taustalla, joten sinun ei tarvitse huolehtia reklamaatioista. Tiedämme, että kuva kertoo 1000 sanaa ja video kertoo 1000 kuvaa, joten napsauta alla olevaa linkkiä päästäksesi Radiology for Dummies-raporttiisi. Toivon, että toipumisesi sujuu hyvin ja pääset pian palaamaan mökilläsi puiden pilkkomiseen.
Now, I do apologize. Thank you. I do apologize that my accent is very Tampere in this particular instance, but I learn slowly. All right. Now, the science fiction author Douglas Adams once had this profound thing to say about our human reactions towards new technologies, where he said he's coming up with a set of rules. Anything that's in the world when you're born is natural and normal and ordinary. It's just the natural way the world works. Anything that's invented between the ages of 15 and 35 is new and exciting and revolutionary. You can probably get a career in it, like a TikTok analyst. Anything invented after the age of 35 is against the natural order of things. I don't know if anyone feels a little bit like this. My mum in Sweden certainly says that the digital future feels digitally dehumanized, but I would argue, au contraire, given the examples you'll be hearing about and that you just heard, the future could be way more humane than anything we have ever experienced before. And yes, we are living in times that are extremely volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, right? And I would in fact argue that this particular report, we should have even larger bubbles at the moment, given that we're also now dealing with climate collapse and artificial general intelligence on the horizon, existential risks. And in that world, of course, we cannot lean on politicians to be great leaders either. Today, we have the choice between a dictator and a narcissist. And I don't think that they're going to safely get us into the future, which is why I believe that it's up to business and community leaders like yourselves to become even better science fiction storytellers. Strategy is just science fiction with a deadline. And for somebody to trust your leadership, you need to tell them a story. This is the fundamental human age-old idea of getting them to trust into the uncertain future, just like Tove Jansson a moment ago. And from our clients at McKinsey, we also learn that it's the innovators who innovate in tough economic times that excel, not just during tough economic times, but those that innovate outperform their competition during tough economic times by 10%, but it sets them up for 30% outperformance once times get better. There's an old Chinese proverb which says that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Let that new acorn start blooming, ladies and gentlemen, and start asking yourself, given that AI now speaks human, and we're all coders today, no matter whether you're an IT guru or not, we can all code today. Given technology speaks human, what human impact or innovation will you start coding for today? Let me just give you a little example of coding for humanity. And apologies to anyone that had loved ones, family, friends impacted by these two particular events. I do think the second one is a great example of how, courtesy of technology, we could have a more humane future. The truck on your left is a dump truck, and it's the same make and model that on Bastille Day in Nice in France in 2016 was hijacked by a terrorist, then driven down the Esplanade, in the process taking 92 lives. Tragically, 482 people injured from that event, and many more suffering from PTSD. The truck on your right is not a dumb truck, but a smart truck, built after the 2012 EU directive that stated that every truck on the roads of the EU built after 2012 had to be part of the Internet of Things, had to be equipped with an advanced braking system and sensors. Now, maybe foolishly or maybe luckily, it was the truck that got hijacked by the terrorists in the Berlin Christmas market attack of the same year. And not after 1.6 kilometers, but after only 60 meters, the truck shut down the terrorist, reducing the inhumane impact of human error. Now, if you're a real cynic, you would also say that in the future, ISIS don't need to send in the humans, they'll just send in the code, which is, of course, why cybersecurity is also so key for our futures. But what I believe here is that we must approach this new second renaissance of flourishing human creativity with an AI growth mindset. And a quick cap nod here to Carol Dweck, Stanford professor's work on the growth mindset. We've adopted it and adapted it a little bit for the AI future. And start pivoting from this old school fixed mindset of, hey, I'm not good at this technology stuff, to going, hey, what am I missing with curiosity? I give up. No, instead, I'll use a different strategy. The stuff we do here is good enough. Challenge yourself and go, is this really my best work to drive future growth? By the way, courtesy of Susanna Hagelstam and everyone at My Speaker as well, all the slides are available for you on that beautiful little QR code as well. Coolest technology that we never used until the pandemic came around. All right. Let me introduce you to my two little Viking sons, Lucian and Aurelian. And no, they're not wearing a wig. This is their real hair color. When the boys live with me in my cabin offshore in Sydney, in Australia, I only speak Swedish with them to keep the cultural linguistics and culture alive with them. And I'm their primary tutor. Did you know that tutoring, private tutoring, by the way, in Singapore is a $1.8 billion industry every year? Those tutors should really freak out now because there's now something called Duolingo and AI tutors. What do you think that will do to the tutoring business around the world? I'm the primary Swedish tutor for my son Lucian in the middle. He's recently learned Duolingo, a beautiful AI-driven gamified interface where he gets rewarded all of the time. It's a beautiful human-centric experience to him. And he notices how good his Swedish is, and he's able to have the courage to speak to his dad even more and try new things that he's learning, like ordering a coffee at a really age-inappropriate time in his life. Right? But this here is an era of what's known as digital nutrition. Did you know digital nutrition that you build, create, and design now is just brain chemistry, somebody else's brain chemistry wrapped in story? I'll say that again. Content is brain chemistry wrapped in story. This comes with huge responsibility for all of us as content creators to create content that helps maybe boost serotonin levels or even lower stress and cortisol hormones. A great example of this mindful technology is the $3 billion app, Mindspace, a mental health app. Now again, my oldest son, Lucian, has a little bit of what his GP calls a pre-anxiety. And she said, rather going to a child psychologist, let me just prescribe you the health app, Mindspace. Isn't this amazing? Doctors prescribing apps as digital content, digital nutrition for mental health. And she goes, is there anything he's into? And I say, well, a bit of a science fiction story. We love Star Wars, and I've introduced it in an age-inappropriate fashion to my son, which is maybe why he's got pre-anxiety. And she goes, why don't you just start using the Star Wars version of Mindspace story? Right? So every night before he falls asleep, we sit down and we do breath work with Yoda, which calms his nervous system and his dad's nervous system. And we get to the really good Tove Jansson stories a little bit faster. Isn't this amazing? Ask yourself, is your customer journey and the way you design your customer experience as soothing and as calming as the Headspace app? Is it as digitally nutritious? And if not, how do you make it so? Airbnb is another example of setting standards even higher, because the standards you just saw from the mental health app, Headspace, is the new expectation of any experience. Airbnb had a problem where they used to rent out properties that, unbeknownst to the owner, would then be hijacked for a party. They set up an AI that now alerts owners if an inquiry, say for New Year's Eve, seems really suspicious. I rent out my home when I'm away traveling, and so sometimes I get a little bit nervous about leaving my cabin in the hands of other people. It's a little eco-lodge and it's won awards, so it's fairly popular. But I love the fact that the AI engine at Airbnb has reduced unauthorized parties in properties on Airbnb by 55% in the last 2 years. This is predictive customer experience. And it might feel luxurious, but today's luxury is tomorrow's expectation. 100 years ago, who would have thought that today we take mobile phones, a coffee every day, indoor toilets, refrigerators in our homes, that's just today's expectation, right? Today's luxury is tomorrow's expectation. And when you innovate digitally, it can also be great for the environment. Yes, we all know that the internet, if it was a country with the 5th largest emitter of carbon in the world, etc., and AI is ravenous for energy, which is why we should be using green data centers for AI. Let me introduce you to this quick concept, twin transformation, used by the luxury retailer Kering Group, who a few years ago set the ambition in 2017 to, by 2024, reduce their carbon intensity on their profit and loss statement, or what they now call their environmental profit and loss statement. They took a twin transformation approach to this, which is when you pursue digital and sustainable transformation simultaneously. And because of this, they were able to really digitally capture the entire provenance of every good that they produce and manufacture, to reskill, upskill, and sometimes replace some of their vendors. Now, they achieved that 40% reduction in their carbon intensity on their environmental profit and loss statement because of this glorified Excel spreadsheet, right? Not in 7 years, but in half the time because of their twin transformation approach. What do they do with this new technology, this new piece of intellectual property? They set it free to every competitor, every fashion school, every fashion entrepreneur and designer, so they could use the same techniques. Because why? Kering, as the most sustainable fashion brand on the planet, is committed to making the entire textile industry sustainable. Let me give you one other concrete example on this front. One of our clients is Telia. And Telia got tasked by the Norwegian government a few years ago with rethinking tollways. Telia just went like, why do we need to build the physical infrastructure when we've got all the digital mobility data on people's iPhones or Oppos or Samsungs, and we can just seamlessly, just like Uber, just charge them on the toll roads in the background, avoiding the emissions associated with building the physical infrastructure. What's your equivalent? Where can you challenge yourself to no longer build something physical because the virtual, the AI, and the digital is so far superior? I obsess with the intersection between the digital and the physical world, so the digital and the analog. I wrote a book a few years ago called Digilog, How to Win the Digital Minds and Analog Hearts of Tomorrow's Customers. It's a little love letter to my mum. She still hasn't read it. But there you go. All right. And I obsess about it because I obsess about great customer experience. Let me just share this little example with you. I do fly a lot around the planet. I used to do so even more. For many years, I traversed the globe. I do so less now that I'm a father. And sadly, my favorite airline that I'm going through a little bit of a rough patch in our somewhat toxic relationship, just for a moment in time, is Qantas. I love Qantas, but we're going through a little bit of a rough, turbulent patch right now because they've recently downgraded me. This sounds like a luxury first world problem, I know, from Platinum 1 to Platinum. But I also noticed that the customer experience with their contact centers, from having a dedicated concierge in Canberra onshore, is now that I get passed around between different places all around the world. No one speaks to each other because there's silos between all the contact centers. So Platinum feels like the new bronze. I'm not expecting any empathy from anybody in the room, but it's been a shitty experience. Also, Qantas is a client, so sometimes I consult with them on customer experience. Okay. But I go, why on earth should we differentiate between the people who fly a lot and the people who don't fly a lot when we've got agentic AI, right? Recently, to add insult to injury on a flight from Sydney to Singapore, Qantas also went, hey, I know you bought a ticket for this price. We have to downgrade you because we no longer have a relationship with Finnair, so we cancel that flight. We moved you on to another flight. You've been downgraded to another class of travel. Oh, and by the way, if you want a refund for this, you have to go and manually do it yourself. And I go, please talk to my agentic AI. Because in the future, in the near future, my agentic AI should be talking to Qantas's agentic AI and managing all of this on its behalf. So that in the near future, everyone should be able to have a Platinum 1, or what I call an agentic AI 1 experience. Why on earth should empathy and customer care only be reserved to those who hand over a lot of money to an airline, when we can deploy technology to do some of these things instead? Let me give you one other example. Who here gets a little bit nervous when your iPhone, Oppo, Samsung battery starts running on low? Sorry to raise all these traumatic experiences. Some of you just have to check your back pocket to see whether you make it through the day or not. Okay, now imagine being a Tesla owner or a co-financier with a bank a few hurricane seasons ago, and you're fleeing from Hurricane Irma in your Tesla, feeling like a great early adopter of new technologies with your loved ones and your most beloved belongings in the car down the highway, and you're enjoying the beautiful acceleration as you're fleeing away from the hurricane, until all of a sudden the Tesla battery starts running on low. And becoming the head of Doge, or Doge, whatever it is called, Elon Musk comes across the dashboard and goes, hey, fret not, human. We've just remotely upgraded your battery via the cloud so you can safely get out of harm's way. True story. This is designing for human centricity and solving problems before they actually become a problem. And this is the new predictive standard that everybody now expects. How are you solving problems before they even occur? I believe your role as a leader today is to build trust. To build trust with your clients and your teams. The best definition of trust I've ever come across is from my good friend Rachel Botsman at the University of Oxford Said School of Business, who says that trust is a confident relationship with the unknown. And how do we move from the known to the unknown as human beings? Tove Jansson. Story. This is how we build glue and trust. What's your new story in your culture? The University of California at Berkeley did some recent research about new technologies. And they asked the question, if you believed you had a new automation or innovation idea that if you deployed it and implemented it, executed on it, would you share, and you would have to do different work as a result of such technology being implemented, would you actually share it in your team? Only 37% of people said, yeah, we'd probably share it. The rest said, we'd probably sit on it and maybe take it to a different company. Then they changed the question ever so slightly to a growth mindset approach and said, if you believed you would be able to do better work as a result of such technology being implemented, would you share it? Magically, 87% of people said yes. In your own teams, in your own culture, as a leader, are you nurturing, different, or are you nurturing better growth mindset and curiosity? Let me give you one final example on this. At UPS, a little delivery company you might have heard about, a few years ago at an event similar to this, somebody said, hey, we looked at the data and it said that 22.5% of all vehicle accidents in the United States is when we turn into oncoming traffic. We spew precious planetary resources. We have our trucks out of action and we have lawsuits as a result and we deliver fewer parcels. Why don't we just stop turning left? Seems ridiculous, this human creativity, right? Then they tested this with GPS technology, RFID tags, and other sensors in little experiments. And they found that, hey, there was some merit to this. And as a result, they delivered 350,000 more packages every year to happy customers. They use less carbon, less fuel, and they take the equivalent of 20,000 passenger cars worth of emissions off the road because of that one human innovation, a process innovation. It's not a new, shiny, new penny. It's somebody challenging the culture around here and what we take for granted. Let me wrap this up, ladies and gentlemen. 3 things that I want you to take away from today's little science fiction journey into the future. The first one is that technology now speaks human. What human impact, innovation, or predictive customer experience will you now start coding for? Secondly, technology is now taking the robot out of the human, like with Heidi Health. What will you do to transform your culture towards an AI digital growth mindset, to do less of the menial and the mundane and more of the meaningful and the truly humane? And finally, leaders today have to become science fiction storytellers to drive digital innovation. My question to you is, what's your trusted story, inspired by movement or otherwise, that will win your talents and clients' hearts and minds? Maybe it's a story of you no longer turning left and being a heretic in your organization. To summarize this, these are my mathematical slides. Right? I believe that the equation of the future is when humans start doing human stuff really, really well, because we've taken the robot out of the human to focus and nurture our emotional intelligence, our unique intelligence as an individual of one, but also our creative quotient. And we sprinkle across that a little bit of technology fairy dust or digital augmentation to create the most empathetic future plans that you could ever experience. Now, as futurists, we hate doing postmortems. We prefer doing pre-mortems. Why? Because we can design a different outcome based upon pre-mortems. And my question, my little science fiction thought experiment for all of you today is to ask yourself this. Imagine that it's now 2030. Come with me on this journey. And you're looking back onto today. And on your watch, your company's gone belly up. What were the trends that you just missed? What were the future signals that you deliberately chose to ignore? And what were the investment decisions that you just delayed and delayed that led to that demise? And instead, as a result of spending time at Bloom today, what change will you make today to prevent that from happening? This is also a really good slide to bring on your next date night with your partner. Now, for those that do want to download all the slides, please make sure you do so. But let me just leave you with this final thought. I believe that today we are at the dawn of what I like to call a second Renaissance. For those of you who were there for the first Renaissance, you'll know that it was a time of scientific breakthrough, of creative expressions, of Machiavelli's, Da Vinci's, Botticelli's artwork and scientific breakthroughs we still thrive on from today. I believe today, courtesy of technology, we'll be able to liberate human growth capacity, our capacity for creativity, and more human-centric breakthroughs. A time where we'll be combining tradition and technology, the analog and the digital, human intelligence together with artificial intelligence to truly create magic, growth, and blooming landscapes for the future that are truly sustainable. Start preparing for that future today, because it is where you, your kids, and your grandkids are going to spend the rest of your lives. See you in that future. Kiitos.